the courtroom plunged into an uneasy silence until the sudden crack of the judge's gavel reverberated against the wooden walls. But even that authoritative sound could not penetrate the dense, smothering silence that had descended on the room. This was more than a courtroom proceeding. This was the climax to a drama that had unfolded for years on television, in confessionals, in secret chambers. A reality television empire was disintegrating, and standing at the epicenter of it all was Meri Brown. She wasn't the same woman fans had remembered from Sister Wives, not on this day. No longer the forgotten first wife, the quiet one relegated to the shadows. On this day, Meri strode in with a forceful composure, a sort of quiet anger encased in a navy blue business suit. Her hair was tied back tightly. Her gaze, laser sharp, a fat folder gripped in her hand like a club. This wasn't the Meri who put up with Kody Brown's blow-offs for years. This was a woman on a mission, and everybody in the room knew it. In the corner of the room, Kody sat. His former commanding presence seemed fragile now, his confidence ebbing away like sand between his fingers. Robyn sat next to him, her hand clenched tightly in his, knuckles white and tight. Her eyes flicked around the room uncertainly. She seemed like a woman waiting for the impact. This was Meri's moment. For months, whispers had trailed the Brown family, rumors, speculations. But while the glare remained focused on Christine and Janelle's publicized departures, Meri had been working behind the scenes. In secret, she'd been gathering evidence, painstakingly. She consulted lawyers. She pulled out receipts. She pieced together connections. And now, appearing before a judge, she was prepared to expose it all. And at the center of it all, money, power, betrayal. Meri accused Kody and Robyn of siphoning shared family funds into their own pockets, leaving the other wives broke and emotionally abandoned. She spelled out how Kody, claiming to be the legal head of the family, channeled money into Robyn's house, Robyn's children, Robyn's future, while Meri was excluded. But this wasn't rumor. She had the receipts, literally. Her attorney presented them one at a time. Emails, text messages, bank statements, title deeds. Each piece added another layer to the facts, and each sheet chilled the air in the room. There were huge transfers, family accounts drained, sent directly to Robyn's account. Records of Meri being pushed aside, dismissed, cut out. There were houses bought with family funds, but only Robyn's name on the deeds. With the evidence mounting, Kody started to come apart. He shifted in his seat. His fingers curled around one another. His smug expression dissipated. Robyn, having begun the day calm, was now leaning forward, urgently whispering in his ear. Her skin grew pale as the judge took his time reviewing the papers. You could feel the room tilt. Gasps, murmurs, disbelief spreading like a wave. Some nodded, those who had long felt that something was amiss. Others simply sat stunned. The fantasy of spiritually cohesive, harmonious family, it collapsed there in that courtroom. Then the judge leaned forward, gaze sharp. "Mr. Brown," he asked, "why were these transactions done without complete family agreement or signatures required?" Kody's mouth opened and then shut. For once, he had nothing to say. "I was doing what was best for the family," he mumbled, almost proactively defending himself. The judge didn't blink. Which part of the family? And then Meri spoke. Smooth, calm, unwavering. "I gave this family decades of my life," she said. "I was there at the beginning. I helped grow our businesses. I helped raise our children. I sacrificed. I believed in what we were building. And I stayed silent because I believed in the we." Her voice shook but barely. Her words sliced clean through the air. "I wasn't just left out, I was erased." Even Kody looked shocked. Outside, the pandemonium was already underway. Cameras invaded the courthouse steps. News teams scurried to report the firestorm. Fans filled the square, some to rally for Meri, others simply attracted by the drama. It wasn't a family affair anymore. It was front-page news. Reality TV had become real life, and it was merciless. Producers on Sister Wives were said to have been banned from the courtroom, but the chatter backstage was instant. Specials, interviews, spin-offs. This wasn't drama. This was a reckoning. And Meri, she wasn't just ready, she was intentional. She'd found her voice, her evidence. And now she had the public and maybe the law backing her up. Kody and Robyn, however, were a shipwreck in the making. What had initially seemed like a solid front was now visibly fraying, panic beginning to set in. When the judge finally declared recess, his expression spoke volumes. This wasn't finished. Not by a long way. He had heard enough to recognize this was not simply a family feud playing itself out in court. This was something much more. A woman who had been silenced, pushed aside, and discounted, now finding her voice. And when the truth came to light, it did more than make headlines. It shattered the facade the world believed it knew. The room shifted the instant Meri's lawyer put that binder down on the table. The air seemed to thicken, as if a storm had blown in. This was not a typical custody battle or a fight over property. This was an expose decades in the making. And Meri, she did not gloat. She did not have to. She remained motionless, her face impassive, her authority emanating not through words but through steady conviction. That three-ring binder, color-coded, tabbed, arranged with nearly surgical precision, was Meri's reality. Contracts, emails, bank statements, text streams, all of it humbly accumulated over the years, as cameras whirled and the world averted its gaze. For years, the show had portrayed her as soft, passive, maybe even overly dependent, but that wasn't the Meri who stood in court. This Meri was quick, strategic, unshakable. She wasn't moved by emotion, she was moved by fact. And as those facts emerged, Kody and Robyn's cool began to fray. The documents told a brutal story. A breakdown of all household income, TV revenue, book deals, endorsements, income that, by spiritual agreement, was meant to be shared equally. But reality told a very different tale. More than 70% of that was invested in Kody and Robyn's businesses. Robyn's name was on everything: property records, business finances, places Meri had never been made aware of, much less made a part of. The biggest shocker, close to $400,000 of the sister wives network deal is supposed to have gone directly into buying a fancy new house for Robyn. And Meri wasn't ever even informed. Did your client have knowledge of this transaction? The judge demanded, eyes squinting. No, Your Honor, her attorney answered. She learned about it from public property records. Kody's face turned bright red. And then came the deluge: emails, texts, voicemails. They showed a direct pattern not only of neglect but of disregard, of control. Meri's messages to Kody were courteous, optimistic, requesting updates, attempting to be in the know. And his responses, scarce, chilly, or worse, missing. In a single message, she had merely requested to borrow a chunk of the family's pooled money in order to reinvest in her business. Kody's reaction: ask Robyn. The room erupted. Audibly, gasps, muttering, visible shock. In that one instant, the facade broke wide open. Robyn was not only Kody's lawfully wedded wife, she had become the gatekeeper of the family's budget. And whether she sought that or not, Kody had bestowed it on her. Then the voicemails rolled. Meri's voice, fragile and shaking, saying why her name was taken off a shared property title. The silence at the other end was oppressive. That lack of answer said volumes more than words ever could. Meri's lawyer didn't mince words. He explained it to the judge, and to all who were listening. This was not emotional abandonment. This was financial exploitation. Calculated omission, camouflaged in religious terminology but based on control. While the family was living in the delusion of equal unity, only Robyn was Kody's wife, and that legal status had been employed, Meri's team said, to drive the others out. Then at last, Robyn cracked. And it wasn't a piece of paper or a number that took her down. It was the burden of truth. As Meri's proof mounted higher, Robyn deteriorated. Tears coursed down her cheeks. She dug tissues from her bag in wild handfuls, her eyeliner smearing as sobs racked her shoulders. She leaned in closer to Kody, breath something she could hardly hear. You said everything was taken care of. And at that moment, the court's perception of Robyn changed. For all those years, many considered her the innocent one, the shy, beleaguered wife entangled in a web of complexity. But now, the years of silence, the comfort that she had lived in as others were excluded, it all came flooding back. The weight of it was finally coming down. Robyn attempted to exit the room, stunned, but the judge instructed her sternly. She needed to remain. Then it was Kody's turn. The room stood in suspended animation. All eyes watched him stand sluggishly, the bravado gone. No longer the TV patriarch with his booming voice and haughty smirk. This was a man stripped bare, vulnerable, and shaken to his core. I never intended to hurt anyone, he repeated, his voice constricted. I led the family out of love. I never intended for Meri to feel replaced. Silence. The judge arched an eyebrow, slicing through the air like a knife. Then why, he snapped, did you erase her name on these deeds? Kody stuttered. That was a technical matter, it wasn't personal. But Meri's lawyer was prepared. He produced another paper, an email exchange. In it, Kody explained why taking out Meri's name would be easier. So much for not personal. Outside the courthouse, the pandemonium was building. Fans, reporters, cameras, everyone pushed to catch a glimpse of the true story unfolding in back of the show. The carefully constructed TV narrative, that of an imperfect but devoted family, was unfolding before television viewers' eyes in real time. Inside, the reality Meri had kept hidden for years was now exposed. She'd been excluded from decisions, left in the dark, emotionally on the sidelines, and financially separated. And now, for the first time, everyone was finally seeing it. She had been portrayed on national TV as clingy, unstable, almost emotional to the point of fault. But now, for all the courtroom to see, Meri Brown finally straightened things out. "I believed in our family," she said, firm but anguished, but it was a foundation set on promises that never came through. The judge, a man accustomed to seeing his fair share of family collapses, sat in unmoving silence. Then he rose, requesting a 15-minute recess to consider the evidence. But before he had moved from behind the bench, he stopped, turned to Meri, and nodded once slowly. He didn't utter a word. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room got the message. Meri's case wasn't solid, it was impenetrable. As the courtroom cleared, Meri collected her papers quietly. No smile, no crying, just tranquil determination. Her body language spoke louder than words. "I did the right thing. What comes next is not mine to decide." Outside there was bedlam, reporters surrounded her. Questions bombarded her. Cameras tracked her every move, but Meri didn't waver. She strode directly to her car, firm head held high. That day, silence was her strength. Dignity was her shield. Later, the inside story was revealed. Meri spoke to her staff and told it like it was. The receipts were discovered. Robyn broke. Kody lost his story, and the judge. He witnessed it all. She was no longer a footnote to another man's history. Meri Brown had rewritten the whole narrative. And the unraveling, that was only just starting. It began with a shudder, almost imperceptible at first. Robyn's hands, which were curled around the bench behind Kody, started shaking. Her gaze swept the room, avoiding everybody, especially her husband. The hush in the chamber was dense, near smothering. The tension wasn't loud. It was a silent tempest, deadlier than any yelling session could ever possibly be. Meri's testimony had blown everything apart. The vision of plural harmony, the religious justice, the mutual affection, all of it reduced to ashes in a few hours. And then the spotlight fell on Robyn and Kody. What followed, nobody was prepared. Kody's attorney attempted to regain ground, assiduously trying to pick holes in Meri's accusations. But hardly 10 minutes into it, Robyn disintegrated. She evaded everyone's eyes. Her complexion turned pale. Her breathing accelerated. And then she burst into tears. This wasn't a solitary tear, elegantly swiped away. This was an implosion. Decades of shame, bewilderment, and hidden realities burst to the surface at once. She cried unashamedly, tissues bunched in both hands, mascara streaming down her face. Her body convulsed with the intensity of it. And then, through sobbing gasps for air, she leaned forward to Kody and spat, barely audible, yet bitter enough to slice across the courtroom. "This wasn't the way we planned. You told me it was all right. You told me it was done." Gasps filled the courtroom. The courtroom stood still. The judge, shocked, called a sudden recess so Robyn could regain her composure. But there was no use. The harm had been done. Robyn's breakdown spoke louder than any legal defense ever could. She wasn't merely emotional, she was taken by surprise, exposed, and possibly betrayed. Witnesses close enough to catch her words distinctly attested. She muttered the words again, low and angry. "You said this was taken care of." This wasn't panic, it was realization. Realization that she may not have been Kody's equal in control, but a pawn in a bigger, calculated betrayal. Or worse, an unwitting co-conspirator. The judge observed her closely as she attempted to wipe away her tears, composing herself. She never ascended to the stand that day. She didn't have to. Her meltdown was louder than any testimony could ever be. And then it was Kody's turn. The man everyone had been waiting for. Kody Brown. The formerly magnetic, brash face of a plural family empire. The man who made marriage monologues, spirituality into television hours. But this wasn't TLC. This was court. And Kody was cracking. He approached the witness stand deliberately, his posture no longer authoritative. He fiddled with his tie. His gaze darted toward Robyn, who gave him a faint nod through clogged tears. Then at Meri, the woman he once vowed everything to. And in that instant, something in him snapped. "I want to begin by saying," he started, voice trembling, "I never meant to hurt anyone." It was polished, emptied out, something a television script might have included, but this was life now. There were no producers, no editing, no do-overs. "Meri and I had our problems," he went on, "but I always attempted to lead with love." He was not so much a husband, but more of a politician in the middle of an apology tour. "I did what I believed was right. Perhaps it wasn't perfect, but I never left anyone behind." He continued to talk, but the more words he spoke, the more tenuous the defense. Meri's lawyer waited, patiently, quietly, allowing Kody to dig himself deeper in. Then the questions began. Mr. Brown, how many family bank accounts do you have personal control over? Kody paused. 3, possibly 4. And how many of those accounts bear Meri's name? Pause, I'd have to check. Did you take $175,000 out of a joint account to assist Robyn in financing the Flagstaff house? Kody swallowed hard. That was a family decision. But Meri wasn't consulted, was she? No, not directly. With every question, the illusion of Kody Brown, the equal leader, the just father, the spiritual guide, started to crack. He stuttered, blamed communication failure, said he was emotionally distant, even used spiritual justification, but never did he take complete responsibility for the damage he inflicted. And the judge had heard enough. He leaned forward, voice clear and sharp. Mr. Brown, would you characterize your family model as equal, in finances, in treatment, in decision-making? Kody opened his mouth, poised to say a confident yes. The line was there. He'd most likely said it 100 times before. But this time, the words weren't there. Silence. A long, heavy pause. And then, finally, a whisper. Not always. 2 words, soft but thunderous. Not always. And that was it. Because that was the essence of Meri's case. Not that she was faultless. Not that she wasn't guilty of errors. But that for years she hadn't been an equal, not in love, not in finances, not in power. And now, publicly before the court, Kody had just affirmed it. The truth was out. And never ever would anything be the same. But body language doesn't lie. Kody might have been talking suavely, but his body was deceiving him in every way. His eyes flicked back and forth to Robyn, hardly even resting on Meri. His foot bounced under the table. His hands clutched the stand as if expecting to be hit. The words he uttered were smooth, practiced. But the truth, it was hidden behind scrunched fists and darting eyes. This wasn't about plural marriage anymore. It was about accountability. It was about justice. And Kody's answers, they fell flat. And then Robyn's silence. Not loud, not dramatic, just chilling, while Kody awkwardly explained. Her face changed, sorrow turning into something more difficult to place. Frozen, wide-eyed, like a woman who finally saw what she had been denying herself for so long. She didn't interrupt, she didn't cry again, she just sat there motionless. A sketch artist in the courtroom later depicted her with her face in her hands as Kody confessed to his clandestine financial choices. She didn't rage out, she didn't yell, she simply sat there, stunned. Outside, the planet went crazy. Hashtags such as Robyn breaks down, Kody exposed, and Meri wins justice trended on social media. Even TLC producers were said to be outside the courthouse, clearly shaken, probably wondering how in the world they'd be able to work this into a future episode. But it was no longer entertainment. It was fallout. The Golden family facade had fallen, and now, each unedited moment was forever in public record. And Meri, she never blinked. She didn't rub it in when Kody tripped over his own deceit. She didn't respond when Robyn fell apart. She simply sat there, relaxed, collected, fingers steepled together in her lap. But you could sense it. This was her time. She had once been the stranger in her own marriage. Now she was the focal point of truth, not out of sympathy, not out of revenge, but because she stood there alone, unperturbed, and spoke the truth. Then the judge requested a second recess, time to legally and emotionally absorb what had been heard. Outside, news trucks congregated like vultures. Speculation flew. If financial dishonesty was established, was criminal prosecution next? On those courthouse steps, the facade broke down. The Kody Brown America believed it knew. He wasn't there. What was left was a man disintegrating, his reputation in tatters, his tale rewritten, his family shattered. This was not a broken home. This was a public accounting, fostered by favoritism, engineered by silence, and now, finally, disintegrating. Within the courtroom, the air was charged with tension. The judge came back, his robe billowing as if the weight of justice itself. Not a peep, not a breath. Every heart held suspended in expectation. Would Meri at last be given the justice she had been so long denied? Or would Kody manage somehow, once more, to bend the system to his will? The judge pushed up his glasses, addressed Kody directly, then turned to Meri with calm determination. And then the words. After considering the testimonies, monetary records, conduct evidence, and legal contracts, this court issues its decree in favor of Meri Brown. The room gasped. Robyn had her hand over her mouth, as if all the air had been sucked out of her body. Tears sprang up immediately. She stretched out for Kody, but he didn't stretch back. His face was white. And then came the rest. Kody Brown was directed to pay all the unpaid debts to Meri, unpaid spousal support, her fair share of the properties, and $47,000 charged without her permission. But the punch came next. This court recognizes your continuing emotional neglect, economic coercion, and habitual disregard of both verbal and written assurances throughout your marriage. Robyn gasped for air, shaking. No, no, this can't be true, she breathed. Meri didn't blink. No smile, no smugness, just calm. It was as if the storm within her had finally passed. Her hands unclenched slowly. She could breathe at last. And then Robyn shattered. When the judge read out the final enforcement conditions, Robyn couldn't sit. She leapt up, face red with rage and tears. You don't get it, he did all this for us, for the family, she wept. A bailiff moved forward to silence her, but the judge didn't blink. He held up a hand. Mrs. Robyn Brown, keep order. This ruling stands. If you can't be respectful, you are free to go. Robyn slumped back into her chair, face in her hands. But it was too late. The cameras had seen it all. The headlines were already being written. Robyn Brown breaks down in courtroom as Meri prevails. Kody glared at her, bitter, disgusted. This was not the story he had wanted. He used to be the narrator, the decision-maker, the one in charge. But now, he was simply a man standing by and letting his empire go up in flames. His lawyer leaned forward, speaking in a hushed rush. Kody didn't answer, his arms crossed tightly, his jaw clenched, his eyes far away. This wasn't merely a loss in court. This was the fall of a kingdom, founded on control. And then the coup de grace. This order shall go into effect immediately, the judge stated. All settlements of property shall be completed within 60 days. Any postponement shall incur additional penalties. The gavel came down, final echoing. Kody grumbled under his breath. Some overheard. She planned this all along. But the truth, he simply hadn't seen it coming. And now, everyone else finally did. Meri hadn't planned revenge. She hadn't built an elaborate scheme. She'd simply, at last, chosen herself. She allowed the law to speak where Kody would not listen. And in doing that, Meri didn't merely walk away. She rose, softly, beautifully, strongly. Her departure was noted not by theatrics, but by dignity, and a soft, resounding applause that sounded far beyond the steps of the courthouse. In the distance, a crowd had formed. Sister wives enthusiasts, legal observers, news reporters, all waiting to catch a glimpse of the woman who once was discarded, now walking tall. She didn't wave, she didn't perform. She simply walked out with her head held high, accompanied by her attorney and her closest friend, Jen, each stride a testament to self-worth. The media moved forward. Meri, how do you feel after this victory? Will you take further action in court? Do you think Robyn is going to end up with Kody after all this? Meri barely listened. But one of the questions made her stop. What do you think to women who are frightened to get out of emotionally abusive relationships? She turned firm. Her voice was quiet, but it held. Don't be afraid to choose yourself. It's not selfish, it's surviving. That line would be viral. Millions would see it on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. And thousands of women would tell them, this is what I needed to hear. Meri was not merely a woman who had won a case. She became a symbol, a cry for the voiceless. Meanwhile, inside the courthouse, Robyn stood stock-still. Mascara smeared her cheeks in shaking black ribbons. She glanced at Kody, perhaps expecting him to reach out and take her hand, to offer something, anything. But Kody simply stood, unfeeling. He shook his attorney's hand, turned, and departed without word or look. Robyn's breath stopped in her throat, and for the first time, she heard Meri's voice inside her head. Kody did not love, Kody controlled. And the second he lost that control, so did his love. She sat down slowly, blotting her tears with a tissue scrunched up from too many meltdowns. What have we done? She whispered. But nobody replied. Because this was not a reality TV moment. This was not the scripted fiction of a loving family. This was the actual story. The unvarnished, courtroom-tested truth. And in that truth, Meri didn't leave as a victim. She left as a survivor, a winner. Kody, he stood alone in the ashes of his ego, humiliated, put in his place, alone. Once the guy who balanced 4 wives, now just a name in court documents. A patriarch naked. And Robyn, no longer the favorite. Just another victim of Kody's love that was never really love. Meri exited more than just a courtroom that afternoon. She exited a prison of 10 years. And into liberty. The judge's voice cut through the buzz. Order in the court. Cameras popped outside like firecrackers. Reporters rushed. The world had been holding its breath, waiting for this moment. This wasn't merely a court decision. It was the emotional peak of a 10-year dismantling between Meri and Kody Brown. The judge raised his glasses, keeping the room in thick silence. Kody was gaunt, Robyn white-faced and shaking. Meri sat quietly, her demeanor serene, but underneath burned fire. A fire that consumed years of betrayal, silence, and shame. Kody fiddled with his tie. The swagger gone. The charm gone. Now just a man, no longer buffered by the legend he had created about himself. The judge said, having considered all evidence, heard both sides, and looked at the vast emotional and financial damage suffered, this court rules. Silence settled like mist. In the case of spousal economic support and emotional abandonment, he spoke to Kody. This court rules in Meri Brown's favor. Gasp everywhere in the courtroom. Even the court clerk leaped. Robyn dissolved into tears. Meri didn't blink, didn't smile. She simply closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Peace, acknowledgement, validation. The judge went on. Mr. Kody Brown, you are ordered to pay Meri Brown $750,000 in damages for emotional distress and vacate her full interest in all business ventures and properties that have been accumulated during the marriage. Another round of gasps. And yet, it wasn't finished. The court further recognizes the psychological damage brought about by public manipulation, humiliation, and abandonment in a plural marriage without legal protection. This case will be officially documented as emotional abuse. It was more than a victory financially. It was a milestone, a statement that emotional abuse, even in spiritual unions, would no longer hide behind tradition. Meri did not win merely for herself. She won for all women still whispering in the dark. And Kody, he sat agog, mouth a bit agape. The man who believed he'd never be questioned, never be challenged, now laid bare. And the world watched. His eyes were wide with shock, his gaze jumping from the judge to Meri. This is madness, he said under his breath. I stood up for them all, I took them in. The judge interrupted, leaning forward with silent passion. And your best wasn't good enough. Emotional abandonment is abuse. Not showing up for your partner is abuse. Having a favorite wife while being neglectful of the others, financially and emotionally, is abuse. Robyn shot up from her seat, overwhelmed. You don't understand, she cried. Kody's been under unbearable pressure, we've all sacrificed. The bailiff stepped forward gently, but the judge didn't flinch. Mrs. Brown, he said firmly, I see your loyalty, but the court's decision is final. Robyn collapsed into her chair, tears flowing freely now. She turned to Kody, whispering, how did this happen? But Kody had no reply. He simply glared at Meri, no longer the woman he used to profess to love, but the woman he had simply misjudged. As the session drew to a close, the courtroom swung open with reporters. Meri, how are you feeling? Does that alter the future of the show? Now what happens to the Brown family? She hesitated, collecting herself, then replied with calm, unshakable resolve. I didn't do this for revenge, I did it for justice. This ruling isn't about me alone, it's about every woman who's ever been asked to remain silent. For anyone silenced, your voice counts. The crowd was motionless, then the applause. Meanwhile, Kody and Robyn exited quietly through a side door, dodging cameras. But too late. One photograph went the rounds. Kody Brown, once the one with all the power, now being run out of it. In mere minutes, hashtags went flaming across the internet. Meri wins, Kody verdict. TikTok blew up with clips from the courtroom. YouTube and gossip channels ran the story. Twitter, now known as X, shot off with harsh analysis. Karma went after Kody Brown, and her name was Meri. This is for every woman who was told to just roll with it. Robyn sobbing like she's the victim girl, sit down. Even fans who'd long since stopped watching Sister Wives were back, attracted to the pandemonium. For them, it was closure. For Meri, it was a start. Weeks later, she started a podcast, Unbroken, My Voice, My Victory, a safe space for survivors, for healing, for truth. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living at last. And Kody, silent. TLC, meanwhile, was panicking, reevaluating everything. The audience had taken sides. Producers had a choice now. Continue to film the man audiences had turned against, or give the spotlight over to the woman they were all cheering for. One thing was certain. Meri was no longer a cameo character in Kody Brown's saga. She was finally writing her own.